Thanks for joining us again. What I want to talk about today is some of the advanced features in Optuma, some of the different chart styles, things that you wouldn't normally see in a charting application, and sort of what makes Optuma so powerful. So again, what we're going to do is bring up a security. So let me bring up BHP. No, I didn't want that BHP. BHP from the ASX shares. Here we go. Again, so one of the things which is really important is the whole concept of total returns, particularly if you are holding for a long period of time and dividends are important. Having the total returns is a definite important thing for you, because then it gives you a much better calculation of the returns that you would make when you're just looking at the chart. So that's one thing to keep in mind as well, and you've got access to that. Depending on whether we have dividends available for the data, some data sets don't have that available, but if it is, then you'll see it up here in the title bar that you can adjust. Now, one of the things which is worth talking about is Optex Bands. This is a unique indicator that we created at Optuma. It's based on market profile, where we took the standard Peter Stottlemyre in the 1980s, a CBOT trader, created market profile, and it was a standard map. And every day he would create a profile of the day, and then that would give him turning points for the following day. I wanted to see if we could make it into an indicator, which we did, and we called it the dynamic market profile here. And so let me just make that a longer one, so 50 period. And so we've got a dynamic market profile, but then based off this and the excursions of price away from this center line, which is called the point of control, we created this Optex Bands, and then we volatility adjusted as well. Where this is really interesting is when we enter this adaptive zone of being oversold. Let me put a crosshair on and you can see what I'm talking about. So every time that we enter this zone, it becomes a really good mean reverting signal. So yes, the results are really interesting on that one. So we do have a couple of other indicators, the triggers, and so we can do a Opt250, which is the 250 line is 2.5 standard deviations. That's what that means. So we can see these signals here when we're entering that zone or touching into that zone, and we can see where they are on the chart. Uptrends obviously works really good, not so much in a downtrend, particularly if there's a long downtrend like here. It doesn't work so well for us. So we do actually have another version too, which is the 250 with trend, and they become big arrows. Let me change their color. And you can see in that case. So in this instance, the market's in a downtrend. It's only when we classify the market being in an uptrend that we have these signals here. So again, that's by Optex Bands. Very interesting. If you want to know more about it and how it's built, you can go to optuma.com/Optex and see an hour-long webinar on exactly how that's built and how we tested it, and learn more about that Optex Bands tool. Okay, so another indicator, or chart I should say, which is really quite interesting is the RRG. Now, RRGs are a great way of looking at a basket of securities, because one of the key problems when you are comparing Apple versus Microsoft, and particularly if you're looking at it as a portfolio manager from a relative basis, is like, okay, well, they both may be outperforming, but which one's better? Which one should I allocate to my portfolio? Or which one should I be overweighting? And which ones should I be underweighting? RRGs really help answer all of those questions. So in the new menu under multi-code charts, we have relative rotation graph, and we can open that up. And I'm just going to use a symbol list here. So let's just use the Dow Jones Industrial Average and bring that up there. So again, what we've got here is our RRG. The basic concepts of this is that anything in this leading quadrant is outperforming the benchmark. The benchmark is the S&P 500. Actually, we should change that and make our benchmark for this one the Dow Jones Index, the DJI. that would be better since we opened up the DJI members. So are any of these outperforming the benchmark? And ones over here are underperforming the benchmark. And again, this is on a relative basis. So remember, on a relative basis, you can have a security that's going up, but it's still underperforming because the average of the whole index is going up faster. So it allows us to see which securities in that index are really the underperformers. And so we see that here. Now, the beauty is over time, so the last year of data, I can go and cycle through time, and we can see that there is this clockwise rotation that happens with RRGs. And that's what is so interesting, because it really means that anything which is outperforming today has a high probability of rolling around and becoming an underperformer. Similarly, something that's underperforming, not many people are looking at it. It gets to that point where the relative benefit of adding that name into the portfolio, it's going to lift, it's going to turn around. Now, not always. There can be some times where, particularly when you get into the smaller caps, where a stock can be underperforming and stay there for a long time and even disappear out of the index. But generally, you will see this rotation happen. And so it's a very powerful indicator. Now, again, if you're using the enterprise editions, you can right-click on a observation, particularly if you start at the sector level. You can right-click on an observation and you can drill into the industry level, or the sub-industries, or down to the individual equities that make up whatever that arrow is that you're looking at, or that index. So there's a lot of flexibility with how you use it there. But what we can also do is, let's bring this chart over to here, and we can just click on this and we can see the chart for Cisco. The RRG lines are the two axes, the X and the Y axes being shown here, and we can see those charts. Another thing we can actually do is we can change our color scheme. So on that bar chart, I want to change them to RRG quadrants. Let me just scroll in a little bit. Okay, we can see that there. Now, what I can see as well, we've got blue here, but Cisco's in green. And the reason for that is I've got to make sure we're using the same comparison index. So let me just set that to Dow Jones Index. And now if I zoom in, you can see that we were in this improving quadrant. And now for the last couple of observations, we've just gone into the green leading quadrant. So again, that's another way that we can use this. There is a different color scheme that Julius de Campana, the creator of RRGs, and that's RRG trend. And so that's really looking at this in another way of trying to work out where is the dominant trend heading based on the same sorts of colors as well. Another thing which is quite interesting in Optuma, I think we are the only one that has a foreign exchange relative rotation graph. Now, this one is very interesting. And the way that I normally would use this is, let me just turn everything off. And let me just double check this. So our benchmark is the US dollar. And I'm just going to do a small basket of securities just to get a feel for how this works. So we've got our RRG here. So this is a group of securities against the US dollar. Now, this one's a little different to an index. When we talk about an index, we're talking about a closed universe where the benchmark is the average of everything that's on the chart. When it comes to currencies, we don't quite have that same sort of relationship. It's more of an open one. And so we get an instance where all of these securities could be moving and they could be way off to one side, depending on how strong. Because if the US dollar was actually really strong against every other currency, well, then they would all be basically pointing down like they are right now. And so because of that, and because it can be a little bit difficult to know, well, hang on, if I'm looking at, let's say, the Aussie dollar here, is that Australian dollar weakness or is it US dollar strength? This chart answers. Now I can see that because every security, every currency is pointing down. then towards the weakening and lagging, that's telling me that it's US dollar strength that we're experiencing right now at this time. But what I want to do is I'm just going to clone this chart, and let's put this one up there. But I'm going to change my benchmark here to the Aussie dollar for me. And so what's interesting is, here I'm looking at it and I'm saying, okay, I can see that all other currencies are heading towards lagging, so the US dollar must be doing very strong. Now, in this case, I'm seeing that all other currencies are heading towards leading, so right now the Aussie dollar is actually probably very weak. And we can continue to do this, and it really does help give that big picture of what's going on. And so if we move here, we can change this to the euro, and we see a little more of a mixed bag. Swiss franc, is that going up? No, it's going down. So we've got, there's been quite a few that were outperforming the euro. Now they're rolling off. US dollars obviously still in leading and still heading in that northeast direction. So it's going to continue on there for a little while as well. You can see how we can build this picture. With all of these, we can open up a chart and we can double click on any observation to update that pair. Oh, it looks like we're missing a little bit of data here. It's a couple of days behind. We can hit fix on that and it will go and get new data for that. So again, lots of flexibility, lots of power in how you set these up. Number of other charts which are interesting to obviously look at. Again, the multi-code charts. If you've got the professional enterprise editions, you're going to see the correlation grid chart, where we can say, right, let's go and grab, I'm going to do a small list because this can take some time. We'll do the Dow Jones again. So we're looking at how are the members of the Dow Jones, how tightly are they correlated? It's on a weekly basis, looking back over 52 weeks, and we have these values. So obviously high correlation, low correlation, etc., all being shown here as well. So again, another powerful one. There's some custom ones like that you've got. In the market intelligence, we have bubble charts, size charts, all sorts of things. So there's let's just grab the currency 10 pairs. And so we create these scripts. And again, over time, we can look. So we can look how all of these things vary over time. So you can see that there are so many different chart styles and different ways that you can view the data. So there's a lot of flexibility there. Now, a couple other things which are just worth showing. So again, let me come in here, I'll open up Microsoft again. And obviously we've got our bar colors here. We can set this to a custom. And then we can have different scripts. So maybe, for instance, I want to color it red when the close, we'll just do this close. Well, actually, no, I'm going to do a different one. Let me do RSI is below, let's say 30. So we're in an oversold territory. Now I've got these colors, and you can see that I can keep adding different colors and I can change the order. The default is black here, but it's going to be red when that RSI condition is true. So again, very flexible. You can have your rules. So then I don't need the indicator. If all I care about is whether the RSI is below 30, I can put that on my bars and have that information right here on my chart without cluttering up the bars as well. Now, were I to put the RSI on, and let's just say the stochastic on, we'll just do a double stochastic here. Another thing that I can do is I can click and drag on this indicator and bring it down into the same tab. And so I've got both of them here as well in the one window, and then I can play with their transparencies and things like that. It does get a little bit messy, but you've got that flexibility. And if I wanted to pull them out again, you can see how the hand there changes, and I can drop it and it creates another window as well. This is similar to layers. We've already talked about this, where you can move items around in the structure panel there as well. Another chart which is worth mentioning is the seasonality chart. So we've got that here, seasonality chart. And let's just do that on the Dow Jones Index. So going from 1900 to 2023, so 123 years, how does the Dow Jones typically perform in each of these months? And so what I can see here is that January is typically an up month, February down, May's typically slightly down, but right now in May 2023, we're a long way down, or 3% down. But, you know, seasonality charts are beneficial. We can trim the data that we use. We can drill in, all sorts of things like that. Another indicator, let me jump back here to this Microsoft chart. And I'm just going to remove this double stochastic here. If you're running the enterprise versions, the relative index comparison, really powerful, particularly again if you are working as a portfolio manager and you've got a benchmark and the relative performance of this security against your benchmark is what you're being judged against. So the relative index comparison tool, very powerful. And again, if you were on Bloomberg and using this, you can choose the different levels of GICs in here as well. So very, very powerful. Can also default the currency. So maybe your RIC, your benchmark is the S&P 500 in US dollars, but you've got an international mandate and you've got international stocks which are in other currencies. You know, it can handle all of that as well. Again, very, very powerful that you have available. That's probably enough to sort of give you a broad idea of the types of charts and advanced features that are available. There's an awful lot of features available in Optuma, and you can spend months and months exploring them. Now, very few people would use all of them. It really is to let you know that these features are available, and if you're trying to find something or there's a different type of way that you want to analyze data that you haven't seen before, let us know, you know, because I'm sure that there probably is a way that we can already do it with what you have in Optuma in front of you now. So thanks again for watching and look forward to the next video.